In June of 1995, it seemed like life couldn't possibly get any better for Mark and Donna Winger. The nuclear technician and his wife had been happily married for several years, and they had just adopted a newborn baby girl named Bailey. Donna was the oldest of 3 sisters in what they described as an incredibly close-knit family. The Dreschers grew to love Mark too. He was smart, Jewish, was attractive, and he was fun. Donna's sister, Jenny Levin, told the media, Donna just felt like she had found her person. After Mark and Donna Winger were married in 1989, he was offered a job and the newlywoods settled in Springfield, Illinois. We always joked about the fact when one sister marries, that husband marries 3 sisters, Levin said. We shared our lives with Mark. Donna was working as an operating room technician and Mark was a nuclear engineer. Donna couldn't have been happier. The only thing she would have liked to was to have a child, her stepfather Ira Drescher said. Donna's mother, Sarah Jane Drescher, said her daughter was overwhelmed when she learned that she could not get pregnant. But then one day while working at the hospital, a doctor told Donna that a teenager was looking to put her baby up for adoption. Adopting the child was an easy decision for her. She looked at me with tears when she said, Michelle, I knew it the minute they put the baby into my arms. She has always been mine. Donna's sister Michelle Hansen said. The Wingers welcomed baby Bailey into their home on June 1st, 1995. Donna's family said the couple loved their new roles as parents. They seemed to have all the makings of a long and happy life together. Mark was just as excited to become a dad as Donna was to become a mom, Hansen said. Donna had met the woman who would eventually become her best friend, Deianne Schultz, at the hospital. And with the arrival of Bailey, the two bonded over motherhood. But then everything turned dark. In August 1995, took baby Bailey on a trip to Hollywood, Florida to visit Donna's family. Her mother had just dropped the 2 of them off at the airport and hired a driver to pick them up in St. Louis, Missouri and drive them back to Springfield. So after the visit, the 2 flew into St. Louis Airport and hopped in a cab driven by Roger Harrington with a 2-hour ride back to Springfield. During the course of the drive, Harrington reportedly began flirting with Donna and talking about drugs and orgies. Detective Charlie Cox, a police officer who investigated Donna's death, later said, this gentleman started opening up to Donna about issues he was having. He had a voice in his head named Dom. Dom would tell him to do bad things. Recently, Dom was telling him to hurt people. After Donna safely arrived home with Bailey, she called the transit company to make a formal complaint about Harrington's behavior, and the driver was suspended. Cox later said that the driver started flirting with Donna, telling her he liked older women and even invited her to attend what he described as one of his sex parties. Donna had told her family that the ride was terrifying because he was driving erratically at 75 miles per hour. After the harrowing ride, Donna had been the victim of some strange phone calls, Weinhoff said. The family had believed that the driver had been stalking her and was a danger. Donna called the limousine company to file a complaint, and Harrington was suspended. Mark argued his wife to write down the story in case they might need it. Elise later found the note describing Donna's harrowing ride in her handwriting at the crime scene. Donna also told Mark about the experience. And though he played a part of the supportive husband and helped her file the complaint, it turned out that he had ulterior motives for doing so. Just days later, Mark invited Harrington to their home, perhaps under the pretense of helping him get his job back. On the 29th of August, 1995, the cab driver wrote Mark's name, address, and the time on a scrap of paper in his car, drove to the Wingers' home, walked inside with a coffee cup and a pack of cigarettes, and was shot twice in the head. Mark Winger then called 911 and told the dispatcher he'd just shot a man who was killing his wife. He informed police that he'd been walking on the treadmill in the basement when he heard a commotion upstairs. He grabbed his gun, went to investigate, and found Harrington swinging a hammer at Donna. In an effort to defend his wife, he'd shot the man twice. Police arrived on the scene to find that both Donna and Harrington still had a weak pulse. Mark was in a back bedroom, rolling back and forth in total shock. When former Springfield Police Detective Charlie Cox arrived at the Wingers' home, he remembered they could see the victims from the front door. Donna was clinging to life, said Sangamon County Assistant State Attorney Steve Weinholt. She had been hit no less than 7 times in the head with a hammer. The second victim, a white man, had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, but still had a pulse when police arrived, said Weinhoft. It was quite chaotic, Cox said. I knew that they were probably going to be transporting the victim soon, so I wanted to try and get identification on the male suspect. Cox found the man's wallet and was able to identify him as Roger Harrington. Police recovered a bloody hammer near the 2 bodies and found Mark's .45 caliber semi-automatic handgun, a yellow mug, and a pack of cigarettes on the same dining table. They also noticed that Harrington's car had been parked against traffic, facing the wrong direction. At the crime scene, said Mark was very upset and very emotional, and that he repeatedly asked who the man he'd killed was. Cox avoided identifying Harrington and tried to calm Mark down. As police combed through the scene, Mark asked police if the intruder's name was Roger. Cox confirmed that it was. Mark was shocked, and he said, "Oh my gosh, that's the man who's been harassing my wife this week," Cox said. Cox, who was familiar with Harrington after he'd lived in a trailer park owned by Cox, believed Harrington might have snapped. I knew him as a very volatile type subject. He and his wife rented a trailer for me, Cox said. Knowing what I knew about Mr. Harrington in the past, how quick he was to anger, I thought that very well he could have gone over there to try to get his job back. There's a hammer laying right there on the table. He picks it up and goes into a rage. Then the husband shoots the bad guy. Tragically, both victims succumbed to their injuries. After learning about Donna's previous run-in with Harrington and listening to Mark's version of events, the police closed the case within days, listing Roger Harrington as the culprit. Because once police examined the scene and listened to Mark's story, detectives concluded that he had acted in self-defense. The case was closed in about 48 hours, Weinhoft said. But Harrington's family insisted from the beginning that their son was harmless. He was no troublemaker. He was a good kid. He wouldn't even strike at anybody, his mother, Helen Harrington, said. I don't think he would hurt anybody, and I don't think he was crazy. So it seemed like Mark Winger was going to get away with murder. Donna's mother spoke to the media about the evening, and the family received the news of her daughter's murder. It was 4 a.m, and I said, Jenny, it's Mom. Something terrible has happened, Sarah Jane Drescher said of her call to Levin. We sat there in my room, just crying at this unimaginable loss, Levin said. In the following months, Donna's mother and sister took turns traveling to Illinois to help take care of Bailey. I loved Mark because he loved Donna, and that's what was important to me, Sarah Jane Drescher said. But I had to be very careful because I did not want to ruin my relationship with him because I did not want to ruin my relationship with the baby. I wanted to be a grandma, and Bailey made me a grandma. Mark was now a single father raising his infant daughter on his own. Donna's family initially flew to Illinois to help out, but they couldn't stay, and they suggested Mark hire a nanny. In January 1996, he met 23-year-old Rebecca Simic, who was searching for a nanny job in the area. Rebecca told reporters, it just felt like Bailey was the one that really needed me the most. She had been through so much already at the age of 3 months. Rebecca was wonderful with Bailey, and even Donna's family agreed that she was like an angel sent to help Mark. While she felt a little uncomfortable in the house, where 2 people had died violently, she was dedicated to giving Bailey a good childhood despite the trauma of losing her mother. I didn't want to like Rebecca, but it was hard not to like her, Levin said. Seeing her with Bailey, there was really nothing bad we could say about her. Meanwhile, Rebecca's role at Mark's home had begun to evolve. When you live with someone and you're taking care of a child together, it's very easy to kind of play house, Rebecca said later on. Rebecca told the media that she was blown away by what the infant had been through in such a short time. Mark made me feel like I was like an angel sent to him from God or Donna, and it was my purpose to make this family whole again, Rebecca said. She lost 2 mothers by the time she was 3 months old. And she was so smiley, Rebecca said. I wanted to get in there and say, I'm going to help, and I'm going to make this little girl's life better. Mark helped Rebecca feel at ease in her new role. After a few months, the 2 found themselves sharing conversation and a glass of wine at the end of a long day. And then one thing led to another as their relationship turned intimate. Within the year, Rebecca was pregnant with Mark's child. The couple eloped in Hawaii in October 1996, just 14 months after Donna's death. I remember asking him how he could move on so quickly, Rebecca later recalled. And he explained to me that when you have a good marriage, it's natural for you to just want that again. Rebecca said Mark had told her he wasn't able to have children. So she said she was very surprised when she found out she was pregnant with his child only months after moving in. Obviously, I wasn't careful. It was just kind of a shock, she said. Mark, on the other hand, was thrilled, Rebecca recalled. Felt like it was a victory to him, she said. Mark put pressure on me to marry him and have children with him. Rebecca said that Mark, who was Jewish when they met, even started going to church with her. She said he told her they could raise a family in a Christian home. I would be honored to be your husband and blessed if you were my wife, Mark wrote in a letter to Rebecca. March Rabbi Michael Datz asked him about his change in faith, and he said that Mark explained Judaism is just too difficult and unforgiving. Rabbi Datz didn't understand, asking Mark, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you need forgiveness for? He said Mark didn't respond. But then it seemed like Mark was trying almost a little too hard to leave the past behind. 16 months after his wife's death, Mark told Sarah Jane Drescher that he was going to sell the house where her daughter Donna had died and buy another one just outside of town. He and Rebecca had started a family of their own, and he started cutting ties with Donna's parents. I received a letter from Mark one day saying to me I could not be called Grandma, Sarah Jane Drescher said. I wrote him back and I begged him, please let her call me Grandma. And he said, I'm sorry, there's no way I am going to allow her to call you Grandma, and that's the way it is. Sarah said she mourned that loss for a long time. Bailey Simic, now 25, told reporters that her grandmother and grandfather, Ira Drescher, would send a birthday card to her every year. I always remember asking my mom, who's Sarah, Jane, and Ira? She said, my mom would always explain those are Donna's parents, and they just want to let you know that, they love you and that they remember you. Eventually, Mark sold the house where Donna had died and moved with his new wife to the suburbs outside of Springfield. Things seemed great on the surface. They had 3 children together, and Rebecca raised Bailey as her daughter. Though chaotic, their life seemed almost perfect. Mark was a loving partner and a very involved father. That would all change quite soon. One day in early 1909, when Mark was feeling ill, Rebecca took him to the emergency room in the hospital where Donna had worked before her death. There, they saw Donna's best friend and co-worker, Deianne Schultz. She seemed upset to see Mark, and Rebecca remembered that Deianne had acted strangely when she first came on Bailey's nanny, as if she were anxious to stay involved in Bailey's life. After they returned home, Mark commented that that may not be the last they heard from Deianne. He was right. In February 1999, Deianne dropped a bombshell on the police, revealing that she and Mark had been having an affair before Donna's death. She said that at one point, he'd remarked to her that things would be easier for them if Donna was dead. She told them that after Donna's fateful ride with Roger Harrington, Mark said that he needed to get that driver to the house. All you'd need to do is find the body, he told her. Deianne never thought Mark was serious, but when Donna turned up dead soon after, she knew he had done it. Mark had threatened her not to tell anyone about the things he'd said, and she'd attempted suicide several times while struggling with her guilt. After seeing him in the hospital, she decided she couldn't keep quiet any longer. After hearing Deianne's story, police decided to take a closer look at the evidence from the day of the murders. The more they thought about what they'd once assumed was an open and shut case, the more questions they had. Why were there no signs of forced entry into the Winger home that August day? Why would Roger Harrington bring his cup of coffee and cigarettes into the house with him if he'd planned to attack Donna? And why would he use the Winger's hammer as a weapon when he had a tire iron and a knife in his car? At that point, investigators came upon 3 never-before-seen Polaroid photos taken the day of the murders. They'd been with the evidence collected in a civil suit Mark had filed against the transportation company that had employed Harrington. Position of the bodies in the photos showed that Mark's version of events were not possible. Mark Winger had stated that Roger Harrington was kneeling right next to Donna Winger's head, and he was beating her with a hammer, Weinhoff explained. He stated that he shot him and that the man fell backward so that his feet remained near Donna's head. In reality, the Polaroid photographs show the exact opposite. Blood spatter experts agreed. Cox later told the media, "I was ashamed of the way the investigation went. I heard Roger Harrington's family. I ran his name through hell for no reason. I mean, he was an innocent victim." It had become clear that Mark was the real murderer behind the scenes the whole time. Rebecca Simic was left to make sense of the tragedy. She had no idea what Mark was capable of, and afterward, she moved her 4 children out of Springfield to feel safer. While Mark had tried to keep Bailey away from Donna's family, Rebecca encouraged them to be reunited. "We'd been hurt a lot by the same person," Rebecca said, "but it didn't break us." Donna's family and Rebecca spoke to reporters about the horrific realization that Mark was a manipulative killer hiding behind the mask of a brilliant engineer and a kind, loving husband and father. In December 1999, more than 4 years after the murders, the Springfield State Journal-Register ran an article based on allegations in the civil lawsuit that Mark had arranged the murder himself and killed both his wife and Harrington. The allegations were based on a blood spatter expert hired by BART Transportation in the case after the arrest of their employee Harrington. Everything came to a head. "It changed everything," Rebecca said of the article. "I mean, it went from Mark as the hero who was defending his wife, this noble stand-up guy that every man wanted to pat on the back, to a manipulative, deviant murderer." As the detectives continued their reinvestigation, they learned that Harrington's roommate, Susan Collins, had initially told police that someone asked to meet with Harrington on the day of the murders, and that she had seen Harrington on the phone arranging that meeting. Inside Harrington's car, they found a note written on a bank deposit slip with Mark's name, his address, and the time to be there. Roger Harrington was not an intruder, but rather he was lured into that home by Mark Winger, Weinhoff said. Deianne Shelter's cooperation with police and evidence that raised questions about Mark's story prompted the voluntary dismissal of the civil suit against BART Transportation. "I didn't see it coming," Rebecca said. "I didn't know that this whole investigation was brewing. I never thought the whole time that they thought my husband was a diabolical murderer." A warrant was issued for Mark's arrest, and he was taken into custody while at work. "I had made plans to go to McDonald's Playland," Rebecca recalled. "We were there and I got a phone call, and it was Mark's secretary, and she told me that Mark had just been arrested. I was just sick, like my whole body kind of went numb, and I just couldn't believe it. I was shaking so badly, and I just remembered feeling so scared. I felt that I owed it to him and to my kids to just stand by him," she said. Hanson, Donna's sister, said she didn't feel relieved following Mark's arrest. "I still wanted to believe he was innocent," she said. "Here's this person that I know in handcuffs, and what's going to happen?" Bailey was just 6 years old at the time of Mark's arrest. She said no longer having her father home was scary. "I just remember everyone just trying to remain calm and kind of at the time being like, Dad's just going away for a while and that he'll be back soon," she said. But that was no longer possible. On August 23, 2001, Mark Winger was indicted for the murders of Donna Winger and Roger Harrington. At the trial in May 2002, a visibly shaky Deianne testified against Mark. The court granted her immunity in exchange for her testimony, though there was no evidence linking her to anything other than keeping Mark's terrible secret. Mark was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. One of the key points the prosecution had to prove was that Harrington had gone to the house to meet with the Wingers, not to commit a murder. They presented the cigarettes and coffee mug that he'd brought inside, as well as the weapons he'd left in his car and the note with Mark's name and address. Mark's attorney argued that Harrington was mentally ill, that he behaved erratically, and that these traits indicated he was capable of murder. When prosecutors presented the Polaroid showing the position of the bodies before they were removed from the scene, Mark's attorney argued throughout the trial that first responders could have moved the bodies. "It's our belief that Roger comes to the house, he's allowed into the home," now retired Detective Jim Graham said. "There were no signs of forced entry, and he was executed at that time." Hearing the gunshot, Donna Winger then comes from the bathroom to investigate. He then beats his wife to death with a hammer. Mark then calls 911. In the 911 call, someone can be heard moaning in the background when Mark tells the operator he can hear his baby crying and hangs up. He had told the operator there was a bullet in Harrington's head, but when police arrived, Harrington had been shot twice. Deianne also gave damning testimony at the trial, saying that Mark told her it would be easier if Donna just died. "I thought it was crazy talk," she said during her cross-examination. After a chance meeting years later, Deianne testified that she confronted Mark in the hopes of gathering information and asked him how he lived with himself, and that he'd replied that he had found Jesus Christ and was forgiven. She said he warned her that if she ever said anything, they would both be in trouble. "I didn't think that anybody would believe her," Rebecca said. "I just thought if Mark truly did that, she would have come forward right away." Mark's defense argued that Deianne was emotionally unstable and just a woman who had been scorned. Deianne Schultz's testimony was able to demonstrate that in reality, Mark was obviously unhappy, unfaithful, and had specifically talked about wanting to kill his wife, Weinhoff said. Schultz was granted immunity for her testimony, he added. There was no direct evidence that directly linked Deianne to actively participating in this crime. In the end, she was such a valuable witness as it relates to presenting the motive. After a trial that lasted 3 weeks, the jury found Mark Winger guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Rebecca said she believed he would be going home with them. After the verdict, she said the words guilty rang through her head and that she wanted the earth to open up and swallow me. Sarah Jane Drescher and her daughters Donna's sisters were with her when they heard the verdict. "The 3 of us just embraced and cried," she said. And the story gets even more twisted because 4 years later, Mark was also sentenced to an additional 35 years in prison when he tried to hire a hitman to kill Deianne, or testifying against him. He even attempted to put out a hit against a childhood friend who had refused to pay his bail. Helen Harrington was relieved and grateful that her son had been vindicated of Donna's murder. "We knew that Roger was innocent, and it finally got proven," she said. "He was branded a murderer at the time, but then all this came to an end." The police also had to come to terms with the faulty initial investigation. "I was ashamed of the way the investigation went," Cox said. "I heard Roger Harrington's family. I ran his name through hell for no reason. I mean, he was an innocent victim." The police department had too hastily closed the case and turned a blind eye to some red flags. "And to right such a wrong, it felt great," Bram added. But Rebecca said there wasn't any closure for her or her family. "When we lose someone, we gather. We have a funeral," Rebecca shared. "But when someone goes to prison, well, what do? You're just kind of left with this emptiness and this hole that you can't really have closure with that." "It wasn't just him being sentenced to life," she said. "We were sentenced to a life of a father in prison." Bailey Simic says she missed having her father around while growing up. "It was really hard being in school, seeing all the other kids had their dads in that relationship," she said. "And now suddenly, I couldn't just go to my dad's room or have him pick us up from school or anything like that." Ben Simic was only a year old when his dad went to prison. "I can look at the pictures and look at myself and say, that kid has no idea. He was way too young to know anything that was going on," he said. Rebecca had to move out of Springfield with her kids, and the home that she'd bought with Mark was foreclosed. She had been a stay-at-home mom for 7 years, so she had no option but to file for bankruptcy. "I didn't have anything to give my kids. Everything had been taken away. All I had was love," she said. Rebecca never remarried as far as we know. She raised all 4 of the children on her own, and Bailey has since reunited with Donna's family. "It was so incredible to see that there's this whole big family that loves me. And Sarah Jane still has my baby picture on her kitchen counter with all of her other grandkids. Even though we've been gone for so long," she said. "We've been hurt a lot by the same person, but it didn't break," as Rebecca said. Although Sarah Jane Drescher says there will never be closure for the murder of her daughter, the family has worked together to set up Donna's Fund, which is a part of Women in Distress, an organization that works to provide shelter for women trying to escape abuse. "Think her legacy will live on through people that we help," Levin said, "and through the beautiful memories that we have of her." Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. were a joyful family, living in a lovely new home in Fallbrook, California. Joseph, the family's main provider, ran a successful decorative fountain business. February 4th, 2010, began as a regular day for the family. Joseph called his father, Patrick, to explain that he was running late for a business lunch. Meanwhile, Summer had been in touch with her sister, who had recently given birth, telling her that she was busy setting things up in their new home. Over the next few days, communication from Joseph and Summer to their relatives abruptly stopped. While some thought it was simply due to their busy lives and caring for two young children, Joseph's father, Patrick, found the situation odd. He had a close relationship with his son and wasn't used to being ignored. As his concern grew, he asked his other son, Michael, to check on Joseph's home. At first, Michael didn't share the same level of worry, believing that his brother was simply caught up in daily tasks and would reconnect soon. Patrick, however, persisted, and eventually Michael agreed to visit the house. When Michael arrived, he noticed that the family car was gone, but their dogs were still at the house, seemingly uncared for. The doors were locked, but Michael managed to get inside through a window. Inside, things were off. There was spoiled food in the kitchen and popcorn scattered in the living room. Despite these oddities, Michael initially thought the family had gone on a trip. However, it was unusual that they hadn't told anyone, so Michael alerted the authorities to his brother's disappearance. The police found no sign of forced entry or violence, though it seemed the family had left in a hurry. By February 8th, the family's car was discovered abandoned near the border crossing between the U.S. and Mexico. Surveillance footage from the border showed a family of 4 walking into Mexico, but the video quality was poor, leaving the police uncertain if it was indeed the McStays. Further investigation revealed that Summer had recently searched for information about Mexico on her computer, leading to speculation that the family had left voluntarily. However, Joseph's father, Patrick, firmly believed that his son would never leave without informing anyone. Joseph's mother, after viewing the footage, was sure the man shown was not Joseph, based on his walk. Michael and Susan took over Joseph's business, while Patrick felt increasingly left out, especially as he was estranged from Susan and had little contact with Michael. Months passed with no solid leads, and the case was handed over to the FBI by April 2010. Unfortunately, the authorities still considered the family's disappearance a voluntary departure, resulting in a lack of exhaustive efforts to find them. The absence of any clear evidence of a crime also prevented police from obtaining access to Joseph's financial records. For more than 3 years, the case remained cold until November 13, 2013, when a motorcyclist stumbled upon a horrific discovery while riding in the Mojave Desert. He found what appeared to be a child's skull and promptly notified the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. Upon further investigation, authorities uncovered 2 shallow graves containing the remains of 4 people, 2 adults, and 2 children. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. Alongside the remains, a 3-pound sledgehammer was found, identified as the murder weapon. Forensic examinations concluded that the family had died from blunt force trauma, likely having been tortured before their deaths. The autopsy revealed that young Joseph Jr. had suffered multiple severe blows to the head, while Joseph Sr. was found with an electrical cord wrapped around his neck. With this grim discovery, the case took a dark turn and was now considered a homicide. Investigators began reconstructing the family's final months by interviewing friends, family, and examining phone records and security footage. A key breakthrough came when security footage from a neighbor's camera revealed that the last person to meet with Joseph on February 4th was his business partner, Charles Merritt. Prior to the discovery of the bodies, Chase had been interviewed by authorities, during which he claimed to have spoken with Joseph on the phone at least twice on the day of the disappearance. Chase had also told the media that Joseph was his best friend, and in one interview, he mentioned being the last person to see Joseph, a statement that raised suspicion among detectives. Chase's behavior after the disappearance was concerning. In an early police interview, he referred to Joseph in the past tense, saying, "He was my best friend." When questioned about this after the bodies were found, Chase claimed he hadn't realized he was speaking that way. Chase had also told police that on February 4th, he and Joseph had a business meeting over lunch to discuss financial matters. During that meeting, Chase said Joseph gave him physical copies of checks for ongoing projects. Further investigation into these checks revealed discrepancies. Digital records indicated that while the checks were dated February 4th, they had actually been written several days after the family disappeared. This led investigators to suspect that Chase had forged the checks to make it appear as though they had been issued before the disappearance. Moreover, detectives uncovered that Chase had a gambling addiction and had been stealing money from Joseph's business accounts for months. It was speculated that Joseph had discovered this, leading to tension between the two and possibly providing Chase with a motive for murder. Police later uncovered that Chase had also issued checks totaling over $21,000 from Joseph McStay's business account in the days following the family's murder. Merritt then went on gambling sprees, losing significant amounts of money in casinos. A bank's customer service employees also revealed to investigators that someone claiming to be Joseph McStay had called to request the complete deletion of his account and all related information. However, the caller failed to provide the correct password, so the request couldn't be processed. When authorities traced the call, they discovered it came not from Joseph's phone, but from Charles Merritt's. Further investigation revealed that on February 1st, Joseph had sent an email claiming that Chase owed him almost $43,000. Adding to this, cell phone data placed Merritt in the Mojave Desert 2 days after the McStay family disappeared. Authorities believed Merritt knew the area well, having grown up nearby. During the investigation, police also received a DNA profile from the McStay family car. DNA found on the steering column and gear shift matched Charles Merritt. With mounting evidence against Merritt, detectives concluded that he had murdered the McStay family. The theory proposed by investigators was that Merritt had killed the family with a sledgehammer, transported their bodies to the Mojave Desert, and buried them in shallow graves. He then drove the family's car to the border near Mexico, abandoning it there to mislead investigators into believing that the family had fled to Mexico. It's also believed that Merritt was the one who conducted searches about Mexico on Summer's computer. On November 5, 2014, Charles Merritt was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. Though he vehemently denied the accusations, he was arrested and brought to trial. However, the trial faced numerous delays as Merritt fired several of his attorneys and even attempted to represent himself at one point. Over the span of 2 years, he cycled through 5 different lawyers. The trial finally began on January 7, 2019. Prosecutors entered the trial confident in their case, presenting substantial evidence linking Merritt to the murders, along with a clear motive. They argued that Joseph had confronted Merritt about the money he had been stealing from the business, threatening to report him to the authorities. Merritt, who had a criminal record involving theft and fraud, panicked, fearing a lengthy prison sentence. As a result, prosecutors suggested he decided to kill Joseph and his entire family to silence them. The prosecution believed that Merritt first killed Joseph and then lured Summer and the children to their deaths. After murdering the family, Merritt hid the bodies for 2 days, during which time he accessed Joseph's bank account and issued the fraudulent checks. On February 6th, he allegedly transported the bodies to the desert, dug 2 shallow graves, and buried them along with the murder weapon. He later abandoned the family car near the border, though his DNA left inside the vehicle would become crucial evidence. During the trial, the prosecution presented security footage that supposedly showed Merritt's truck leaving the McStay residence. However, the video was blurry, leading to debate over whether it truly was Merritt's truck. The defense seized on this and other inconsistencies, including the unclear location of the murders. Prosecutors could not definitively say if the killings occurred in the family home or elsewhere, such as the desert. Merritt's defense team argued that he had an alibi. His girlfriend at the time testified that Merritt was with her at home on the night of February 4, 2010. His daughter also stated that she remembered her father being home that night. As for Merritt's cell phone data placing him in the Mojave Desert on February 6th, the defense explained that he could have been in the area to visit his sister. Juanita, Chase's sister, testified that her brother frequently visited her, though she couldn't recall if he had visited on that specific day. However, prosecutors confronted Juanita with a recorded police interview from 2013, in which she claimed that Charles rarely visited her and hadn't done so for 5 years, which contradicted her trial testimony. The defense also tried several tactics to derail the trial, including accusing prosecutors of withholding evidence and requesting that key figures in the case be removed. However, the judge overseeing the case rejected these motions, allowing the trial to proceed. Chase Merritt's defense attorneys argued that the prosecution failed to thoroughly investigate other individuals who had motives to harm Joseph McStay. They pointed to 3 men they considered persons of interest, with the first being Joseph's brother, Michael McStay. When Michael took the stand, Charles Merritt's attorney asked him several pointed questions, suggesting he could be responsible for the crime. The lawyer inquired about Michael's relationship with his brother, to which both Michael and the rest of the family asserted that it was good. However, the defense raised doubts, questioning why Michael did not immediately go to check on his brother's home and why he was slow to report the family's disappearance. In response, Michael admitted that he hadn't been overly concerned at first, thinking his brother had simply gone on a trip with his family. The defense also suggested that the truck seen in the security footage could have been Michael's, not Charles. But a particularly strange detail that led some people to suspect Michael was that before the family's bodies were found, he told officers that he hoped they weren't buried in shallow graves. This statement caused significant debate, as the McStay family was indeed discovered in shallow graves in the Mojave Desert. Many found it suspicious that Michael could have imagined this scenario with such accuracy. However, Joseph and Michael's parents dismissed the comment as an unfortunate coincidence, while others found it highly unusual. In addition to Michael, the defense also pointed the finger at Joseph's other business partner, a man named Dan Kavanaugh, who managed Joseph's online sales. Dan, known as Dan the Hacker due to his computer expertise, worked with Joseph to promote and sell their products online. His compensation was a percentage of the online sales. Dan had previously been on police radar when his ex-girlfriend Tracy accused him of confessing to the murders in early 2018. Tracy's claims were dismissed, however, as she had a history of substance abuse and was on bad terms with Dan, leading the authorities to believe she might be trying to falsely incriminate him. According to Charles Merritt's defense team, Dan had a strong motive to harm Joseph. At the end of 2009, Joseph and Dan had clashed over profit distribution. Dan believed he was entitled to a share of not just the online sales, but all sales, while Joseph disagreed and initially refused to pay more. Dan allegedly threatened to ruin Joseph's online business by redirecting his website's traffic to adult sites. Ultimately, Joseph agreed to give Dan more money, including his BMW and additional payments. The last of these payments was due around the time of the family's disappearance. After the murders, Dan continued to work with Susan, Michael, and Charles to keep the business running, but he later sold the company in June 2011, pocketing over $100,000. The defense argued that Dan's exclusion from certain projects and lack of payments could have pushed him over the edge. However, Dan had a solid alibi. He was vacationing in Hawaii with his girlfriend during the time of the murders. His ex-girlfriend testified that they were together on February 4, 2010, and posted photos to Facebook as evidence. While some people questioned the validity of social media posts as proof, the ex-girlfriend maintained that she had no reason to lie for Dan, as they were no longer together and had parted on bad terms. The police eventually confirmed that Dan had indeed been in Hawaii at the time of the killings. During the trial, the defense also brought up Joseph's ex-wife's partner, suggesting that he too could have been involved. Joseph had a son named Jonah with his ex-wife, and tensions between Joseph and her new partner had escalated prior to the murders. Nevertheless, the police ruled him out as a suspect. Despite the defense's efforts to shift attention away from Charles Merritt, by June 2019, the jury found Merritt guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder. Before the sentencing hearing, the victims' families gave emotional statements. Patrick, Joseph's father, addressed Merritt, saying that Joseph had done so much to help him and his family, particularly when Merritt faced legal troubles in 2009. Susan, Joseph's mother, called Merritt a despicable monster who had brutally killed 2 innocent children, her grandchildren. She labeled him a coward and a baby killer. Summer's sister tearfully shared how their family would forever be scarred by the loss of their loved ones. Joseph's eldest son, Jonah, also spoke, recounting the devastating impact of losing his father, stepmother, and younger siblings when he was just 12 years old. After hearing these victim impact statements, Merritt asked to speak. Through tears, he insisted on his innocence, declaring that he did not commit the murders and did not deserve what was happening to him. "I didn't do it," he said. "With God as my witness, I will prove everyone wrong." He added that he loved Joseph and would never have hurt him or his family. Merritt's sentencing was delayed after he once again requested to dismiss his attorney, though the judge rejected this motion. His legal team also filed for a new trial, accusing the prosecution of misconduct, but this request was also denied. Finally, on January 21, 2020, after years of delays, the San Bernardino Superior Court sentenced Charles Merritt, then 62 years old, to death. Despite the death sentence, it is unlikely that Merritt will ever be executed, as California has not carried out an execution since 2006. Instead, Merritt will likely spend the rest of his life in the death row. Case of Brooke Skyler Richardson. In Ohio, the Richardson family, consisting of Kim, Scott, and their children Jackson and Skyler, seemed like a typical family. Skyler was a cheerleader who struggled with an eating disorder from a young age. Her mother Kim first noticed this when Skyler was 12 years old and refused to buy gum with more than 5 calories. As a flyer on the cheerleading squad, Skyler felt pressured to maintain a certain weight. This obsession with her body image led to a constant fear of gaining weight. During cheerleading season, Skyler started throwing up after meals to control her weight, which only made her issues worse. When the season ended, her struggles intensified. Skyler experienced episodes of binge eating, followed by periods of starvation or extreme dieting. Her parents grew concerned, but Skyler shut down whenever they tried to talk to her about it. They sought professional help from various doctors and therapists, who eventually diagnosed Skyler with body dysmorphia, a condition where she obsessively focused on a perceived flaw in her appearance. In July 2016, Skyler began dating a friend's cousin, but the relationship didn't last long. By January 2017, she had moved on to a new boyfriend, Brandon, and seemed genuinely happy and healthy. Her parents noticed her weight gain and thought her eating disorder was under control. In February, Skyler picked out her prom dress, a tightly fitted gown that required her to be laced into it. During a family vacation in mid-March, she wore a 2-piece bathing suit and looked wonderful. Her mom, Kim, wanted her to start taking birth control pills to protect her health. In mid-April 2017, Skyler visited her mother's gynecologist to obtain a prescription for birth control. However, during the visit, the doctor informed Skyler that she was approximately 8 months pregnant. Skyler requested the doctor not to tell anyone, and her mother remained unaware of the real reason behind her tears. Skyler and her boyfriend Brandon attended the prom on May 5th, despite her advanced pregnancy. 2 months later, on July 14, 2017, the police showed up at the Richardson home. They informed Skyler's parents, Kim and Scott, that they needed to speak to the teenager about something she may have witnessed. The police officers assured the parents that Skyler was not in trouble and took her at their word. Scott decided to drive Skyler to the police station, unsure of what awaited them. The police wanted to question Skyler regarding a call they received from a gynecologist's office. A patient of an OB/GYN doctor gave birth to a stillborn baby and buried it in their backyard. The police were informed and took Skyler, the patient, into custody for questioning. Her father was not allowed to be present during the initial interview. The police read Skyler her rights and shared the details of the doctor's report. According to the doctor, Skyler had discovered her pregnancy on April 26th, but later reported that the baby was not alive and had been buried in the backyard. Skyler admitted to the police that she had given birth to a stillborn baby girl on May 7, 2017. She explained that she delivered the baby in the bathroom, noticed it was not breathing, and had no heartbeat. Feeling the need to bury the baby, she retreated to the backyard, dug a shallow grave, and buried the body. To mark the spot, she placed a vase with a flower at the burial site. The police informed Skyler's parents, Kim and Scott, about the true reason for her detention. They were shocked to learn that Skyler had been pregnant, as they had no idea. They expressed sadness that Skyler had gone through this ordeal alone and without their support. Skyler revealed that she had named the baby Annabelle and claimed the father was a close friend's cousin, whom she briefly dated. Crime scene investigators searched the Richardson backyard, removing weeds and debris to uncover the baby's remains. Despite the challenges, they found several bones, including pieces of the skull, which they carefully collected and preserved. After more than 5 hours of questioning, Skyler and her parents were allowed to return home. However, 6 days later, the police contacted Skyler again, informing her that they had received new information from the coroner's office. They claimed that the baby's bones showed signs of burning, which Skyler vehemently denied. She insisted that she would never harm her child. Police suggested that Skyler might have tried to cremate the baby to hide the evidence, but she continued to deny any wrongdoing. However, Skyler suddenly changed her story, admitting that she may have used a lighter to try and cremate the baby's remains. She also stated that the baby might have been born alive and made a noise or even cried before dying. Skyler confessed to holding the newborn too tightly, which might have contributed to its death. During a lengthy interrogation, the police gathered enough evidence to arrest Skyler on a charge of reckless homicide. They believed she had suffocated her baby. After presenting the case to a grand jury, Skyler was indicted and arrested for aggravated murder, which carries a mandatory life sentence in Ohio. At her arraignment, Skyler pleaded not guilty to additional charges of voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and endangering children. She spent the weekend in jail until her family secured a $50,000 bond. Skyler became the center of a media frenzy following her child's tragic death. The public judged and scrutinized every move she and her family made, taking a toll on their well-being. They retreated to the safety of their home, but even stepping outside became difficult due to threats and photographers. Despite her defense attorneys believing Skyler gave a false confession, the prosecution pressed forward with their case. Even when the medical examiner retracted her initial report of burning, the prosecution clung to Skyler's admission that she had attempted to cremate the remains. Throughout this period, Skyler's family endured immense stress and fear. The public scrutiny and threats made their lives unbearable, and they struggled to navigate a world under constant scrutiny. Skyler's defense attorneys worked tirelessly to defend her against the charges. Skyler's family raised the $50,000 bail, but as a condition of her release, she was ordered to wear an ankle bracelet. She remained confined to her home, avoiding public appearances. Over 12 months, Skyler's life took a different path. Her university plans were put on hold as she awaited trial for her baby's murder. The charges were serious, and the defense filed a motion to move the trial to a different county, but it was denied. Skyler faced the trial in the original jurisdiction, grappling with the emotional and psychological impact of the allegations and her isolation. Spending time with her dogs provided comfort and companionship as she awaited her trial. Her family stood by her, believing in her innocence and hoping the truth would come to light. Despite the challenges, Skyler remained determined to fight for her freedom. In July 2019, the state offered a plea deal. If Skyler pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, they would withdraw the aggravated murder charge. Skyler's parents were conflicted about the decision, but after careful consideration, Skyler turned down the plea deal. This decision terrified her parents, who wondered if she made the right choice, but they knew it was her decision, not theirs. Skyler went on trial on September 3, 2019 for the murder of her newborn baby girl. The prosecution presented as evidence a text message Skyler sent to her mother shortly after giving birth, saying she was happy and excited that her belly had returned to its normal size. They claimed this showed Skyler was relieved to be rid of her baby. The prosecution alleged that Skyler sent more texts to her mother and boyfriend within 24 hours of the baby's death, conveying her excitement and happiness. They pointed to phrases like, "I'm so excited and I feel so much better this morning," as proof of her guilt. The state believed Skyler was thrilled about the baby's death and attempted to hide her guilt. The prosecution also claimed Skyler had no intention of keeping her baby and presented evidence that she had searched online for ways to get rid of the baby. They alleged that Skyler's mother had threatened that her life would end if she became pregnant, which instilled fear in Skyler. On the third day of the trial, a doctor testified that the baby's death was a violent homicide, but admitted she couldn't determine when the baby's skull fractures occurred. The defense challenged the doctor's findings, suggesting she may have been biased. The defense also questioned the doctor's methods, pointing out that she didn't examine the remains under a microscope or consult with an obstetrician. Another doctor, a fetal medicine specialist, testified that it was unlikely the baby was stillborn, citing Skyler's admission that she felt the baby moving inside her. The prosecution's case included shocking evidence, including images of the deceased baby's remains, which visibly affected Skyler during the trial. Skyler's reaction to seeing pictures of her baby's remains was to stare straight ahead, avoiding eye contact. This stoic behavior contrasted with her emotional response the previous day when the judge entered the room. Skyler's defense attorneys argued that her life was far from perfect, even before the murder accusation. They claimed the prosecution's evidence was incomplete and misleading, and some texts were taken out of context. They emphasized that Skyler's frequent use of certain language did not prove she murdered her daughter. The defense highlighted Skyler's mental health struggles, particularly her long battle with an eating disorder. They presented evidence of her regular visits to a psychologist and nutritionist, along with pictures showing her varying weights and appearances. They argued that despite her physical state, Skyler tried to comfort and care for the lifeless body after giving birth. Skyler's attorney explained that she intended to tell her family about the pregnancy, but never had the chance. According to her doctor, she had 8 to 10 weeks before delivery and planned to attend prom and graduate before telling her mother, whom she knew would be unsupportive. An obstetrician testified that the baby was stillborn, and Skyler's description of the baby's appearance suggested it was not a healthy newborn. The doctor pointed out that Skyler only gained 15 pounds during pregnancy, possibly restricting the baby's development due to her eating disorder. The defense aimed to cast doubt on Skyler's statements to the police, suggesting she only told them what they wanted to hear. They argued that other factors may have contributed to the baby's death, and Skyler did not harm the baby. Skyler Richardson's trial lasted for 1 week, after which the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a verdict. She was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment, but convicted of abuse of a corpse, a felony that carries a sentence of up to 1 year in prison. The judge ordered her to be held in jail until her sentencing hearing, which took place the next day. During the sentencing hearing, Skyler apologized for her actions and acknowledged the harm she had caused. The judge strongly admonished her for her role in the tragic loss of her baby, believing that if she had made better decisions during her pregnancy, her child would still be alive today. The judge sentenced her to 3 years probation for abuse of a corpse, emphasizing that her actions were morally reprehensible and illegal. In November 2020, a judge granted her request to terminate her probation 2 years early, acknowledging her progress and agreeing that she no longer required supervision. Since being acquitted, Skyler has taken advantage of her opportunity to demonstrate her rehabilitation. She has completed 2 semesters of college and has been working part-time at the law firm that represented her. Although she has faced challenges in finding employment due to her probationary status, Skyler remains determined to pursue her career goals, including attending law school and becoming a public defender. In the northern suburbs of Toledo, Ohio, lived the Lisk family, a blended household of 5. The family included 53-year-old Bill, his wife Susan, aged 48, and their 3 children, Devin, Derek, and William. Devin and Derek were Susan's children from a previous marriage, while William was Bill's son from his first marriage. The family seemed to live a relatively peaceful life in a spacious home situated on hundreds of acres near Lake Erie, close to national parks and wildlife areas. Their favorite pastimes included hunting and fishing, activities that allowed them to enjoy the outdoors together. Susan, who had worked as an office manager for the Northwest Carpentry Training Board, loved gardening, camping, and was known as a loving mother. Bill, a retired Air Force veteran, shared her passion for the outdoors. The kids, especially William, enjoyed spending time near Lake Erie. As the children grew older, they attended church every Sunday, blending into the quiet rural life. However, William had a more turbulent personality. As a child, he was often irritable, bullying other children and stirring up conflict wherever he went. His parents initially dismissed his behavior as typical mischief, expecting it to improve with time, but his disruptive tendencies only worsened during adolescence. By the time William was 15, his behavior had escalated to a point where he had several run-ins with the law. It was around this time that his father, Bill, met Susan through their work and eventually married her in 2001. William resented Susan's arrival into his life. He disliked her presence in the household and openly rebelled against the strict rules she introduced. As the tension between William and his stepmother grew, so did his disobedience. By 2002, at age 16, William had been placed under house arrest for a crime. He had threatened to harm himself, and when the police arrived, the situation escalated into physical violence. William was charged with assault in juvenile court. In 2004, during a heated argument, William struck Susan in the chest. 2 months later, he assaulted her again, hitting her on the head with a coffee mug and stealing her car. Susan, overwhelmed by the violence, pressed serious charges against him. However, William was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and was deemed unfit for trial. The assault and theft charges were dropped, though his relationship with Susan remained fraught. His father, Bill, made the difficult decision to place William in a psychiatric group home near Lake Erie in Sandusky. Even though William was under treatment, he continued to pose a threat to those around him. During his time in Sandusky, William had multiple violent encounters with law enforcement, one of which occurred when his father was present to pick him up. Despite the treatment, William's condition didn't improve and he remained agitated. In the fall of 2004, at 18 years old, William's aggression took a frightening turn. One morning, he attempted to attack Susan while she was in the shower. Although Susan managed to fend him off, she was left injured, both physically and emotionally drained from the prolonged abuse. That night, Bill made the painful decision to expel William from the family home. From that point on, William had to fend for himself. The strained relationship between him and his family worsened, particularly with Susan and his half-siblings, leading to frequent arguments whenever they crossed paths. Over the next few years, William continued to receive sporadic treatment for his schizoaffective disorder. By 2007, Bill, despite all the challenges, remained committed to helping his son. He sought legal guardianship over William in an attempt to secure his release from the psychiatric hospital. Bill's hope was to place William in a halfway house or group home where he could receive more appropriate care. Though William's condition could be somewhat controlled with medication, he often refused to take it, believing he was fine. Instead, he turned to alcohol and marijuana, further complicating his behavior. Thanks to Bill's efforts, William was eventually released from the hospital and placed in a relatively free-living rehabilitation center. However, his visits to his father's home remained tense. Around this time, a neighboring family lost their pet dog, which was found shot. Suspicion fell on William, though no proof was ever found. While it was just a pet, the incident hinted at something darker, raising alarm among the community. To minimize William's interactions with Susan and the neighbors, Bill often took him to the family's cabin in Carroll County on weekends, hoping that some time away might calm his son. The cabin was just a few hours' drive from northern Ohio. Bill often took William there to hunt and talk, hoping these trips would ease the tension between William and the rest of the family and improve his mental state. Unfortunately, this only provided temporary relief and did nothing to address the underlying issues. William's dislike for his stepmother remained unchanged and his mental health continued to deteriorate. A family friend, Mark, recalled numerous conversations with Bill, where he voiced concerns about the safety of the Lisk family. When William started causing trouble and had physical altercations with Bill, Bill would frequently call Mark for help. Despite the physical harm he endured, Bill was determined not to give up on his only son, convinced that William wouldn't intentionally hurt his family. On the morning of October 31, 2010, Halloween Devon, Bill's 16-year-old stepson, returned home around 9:30 a.m. after spending the previous night at his biological father's house. He was getting ready to change clothes before heading to church. As he came downstairs after changing, he encountered William, which struck Devon as odd, as William had already moved out and rarely stayed at the house. The couch had been made into a bed, suggesting William had slept there the night before. They exchanged brief pleasantries, and William asked Devin where he was going, how long he'd be out, and how he was getting there. William's unusually chatty demeanor surprised Devin, as their relationship had always been tense, marked by frequent arguments. Devin shrugged off William's sudden friendliness, answered quickly, and left for church. By 1:30 p.m., after attending church services, Devin returned home. He headed upstairs to play video games in his room. Shortly after, he noticed something strange. The house was eerily quiet. Curious, Devin walked downstairs to check on his mother and stepfather, assuming they had overslept. To his shock, they were still in bed, and his mother's legs were hanging off the edge of the bed. Devin approached and tapped his mother's leg, attempting to wake her. That's when he noticed her pillow stained with what looked like blood. Initially, Devin thought it might have been a Halloween prank from the previous night's party, but as the minutes passed, it became horrifyingly clear that his parents had been murdered. In a panic, Devin fled the house and called his Aunt Lori. At that moment, Devin didn't think to check on his brother Derek or his stepbrother William. Lori quickly alerted the police and rushed to the Lisk house. When law enforcement arrived, they found a gruesome crime scene. In the master bedroom, under the sheets lay the bodies of Bill and Susan. Bill had been shot in the face while still in bed, seemingly asleep. Susan had been shot 3 times in the head, and her body appeared to have been moved after her death. Forensic evidence later revealed that Susan had also been bludgeoned after she was already dead. In another room, police found the door locked. Upon forcing it open, they discovered 23-year-old Derek curled up in his bed, also killed. He had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, and a bloodied hammer matching his injuries was found nearby. The forensic investigation concluded that the family had been murdered in their sleep, starting with Derek, followed by Bill, and lastly Susan. Muddy footprints were found around the house, leading to a pond in the backyard. Initially, investigators believed the murder weapon might have been discarded there, but after draining the pond, they found nothing. In total, 3 people had been murdered: Bill, Susan, and their son, Derek. Later, during Susan's autopsy, it was discovered that she had been sexually assaulted post-mortem, a heinous addition to an already horrific crime. Aunt Lori immediately told the police that she suspected William, Bill's son, as the killer. William had a history of mental illness and deeply resented Susan. He had previously threatened and assaulted her. Adding to the suspicion, William had been staying at the house the night before the murders, and the family's white truck was missing, pointing further in his direction. Neighbors interviewed by the police mentioned hearing some noises, possibly gunshots, around 6:30 a.m. on Halloween morning. But living in a rural area, they didn't think much of it at the time. They also recalled seeing Bill and William returning from a hunting trip the day before and attending a Halloween party with the family that night. Everyone at the party seemed happy, but neighbors noticed that Derek wasn't present, which wasn't unusual given that Derek and William didn't get along. William rarely stayed overnight at the Lisk home, but because Bill and Susan had been drinking at the party, they allowed William to sleep over after the festivities ended. This exception would later prove to be fatal for the Lisk family. Reports suggest that when Devin returned home that morning before heading to church, his family may have already been killed by William. The fact that William spoke to Devin upon his return implies that William chose to let Devin leave the house without harming him. However, William did ask how long Devin would be gone, indicating that he might have murdered the rest of the family after Devin had left for church. Phone records show that the last call from Derek was at 2:02 p.m. the day before the murders. Authorities quickly tracked William down, finding that he had returned to the family's cabin. He had been hunting there with his father less than 48 hours earlier. Bill had taken a week off, and the two had only returned home 24 hours before the killings. A police officer reported spotting a white Ford truck and decided to check the cabin. The truck matched the description of the one missing from the Lisk home. As police kept watch over the property, they observed William step out onto the porch, leaning against a post and smoking a cigarette. William was promptly arrested. Surveillance footage from a nearby restaurant showed William purchasing the sandwich. Forensic experts searched the cabin, gathering the truck and William's clothing as evidence during his initial arrest. At first, William was only charged with a single count of murder, which allowed the police to hold him until further charges could be brought before a jury. The jury would decide if additional charges would be filed. When William was transferred from the detention area to the intake unit, he was instructed to wear a suicide prevention suit, which he refused. An officer was tasked with overseeing William. He insisted William to wear the suit, leading to a physical confrontation where William scratched the officer's face. Another officer intervened, threatening William with a stun gun before he finally complied and put on the suit. Despite this altercation, no further charges were filed against him. The police were already familiar with William, as he had been in and out of trouble frequently. In November 2010, William was officially charged with 6 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts per victim. 3 of the charges were for premeditated murder, while the remaining 3 were for aggravated robbery. William pleaded not guilty to all charges, with his defense lawyer entering an insanity plea on his behalf. He was held in jail with bail set at $3 million. Sometime later, William appeared in court. He faced 6 counts of aggravated murder. He underwent a 30-day evaluation to determine if he is competent to stand trial. The 24-year-old was accused of murdering his father, Bill, his stepmother, Susan, and her son, Derek. If convicted, William would face the death penalty. Despite his history of mental illness and after being evaluated twice for competency, William was ultimately found fit to stand trial. Knowing he could face the death penalty, William altered his defense strategy. On August 12, 2011, in a pretrial hearing, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of aggravated murder in exchange for the prosecution waiving the death penalty. William was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Before his sentencing, William expressed remorse for killing his family, attributing his actions to Satan and his mental illness. William had struggled with long-term mental health issues, frequently stopping his medication, which only worsened his condition. Despite efforts from those around him, especially his father Bill, who never gave up on his son and tried to find treatment for him, the family conflicts continued. Tragically, Bill's love and efforts were in vain, and his life ended at the hands of his own son. The case of Bobbi-Anne Bobbi-Anne lived with her parents, Donna and Adrian, and her brother Lee in Plymouth, a lively coastal town in southwest England. On November 20th, 2021, Bobbi-Anne left her home around 5:45 p.m., heading to the bus stop on Sheepster Road. She had told her father that she was going downtown to meet her boyfriend and friends, something she had done many times before. The bus stop was familiar to her, and she reached it within a few minutes. An hour and a half passed, and Bobbi-Anne's mother, Donna, sent her a text to check if she had arrived safely. When Bobbi-Anne didn't reply, Donna tried calling her, but her daughter also didn't answer. This was unusual, and Donna became worried. About an hour later, Bobbi-Anne's boyfriend called her parents, asking if she was at home. He was concerned because Bobbi-Anne hadn't shown up for their scheduled meeting, and he hadn't been able to reach her by phone. Bobbi and his parents called all her friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts. With growing concern, they reported her missing to the police. It was already past 9 p.m. The next morning, November 21st, police, along with McLeod's family and volunteers, began a thorough search of the area. Flyers with Bobbi-Anne's picture were distributed across the city, and her disappearance was shared on social media and local news outlets. Bobbi-Anne's brother, Lee, made a desperate plea on social media, urging everyone in Plymouth to help search for her. He asked people to report any information or sightings to him. The police investigation revealed that Bobbi-Anne had planned to take a bus downtown, but she never boarded it. However, a local resident came forward, stating that he had seen Bobbi-Anne at the bus stop the previous evening. This new information confirms that Bobbi-Anne did indeed arrive at the bus stop, but did not get on the bus for unknown reasons. Further evidence was found when police discovered Bobbi-Anne wireless headphones in the walkway behind the bus stop. The area was sealed off, and police officers conducted a meticulous search of the surrounding area, scouring every inch for potential clues. Evidence was collected along the girl's usual route from her home to the bus stop, as well as on surrounding streets. Since Bobbi-Anne was last seen at the bus stop but never boarded the bus, and her headphones were found nearby, authorities suspected she might have been kidnapped. Investigators attempted to locate her cell phone, which was detected within the city limits, but they couldn't pinpoint its exact location. All calls to her number went straight to voicemail. The police eventually found Bobbi-Anne's phone. On November 22nd, police, family members, and volunteers conducted a thorough search of the area surrounding Bobbi-Anne's home, but unfortunately, no leads were found. The following evening, November 23rd, the police announced the discovery of a woman's body at Bobbi-Anne Beach, approximately 8 miles from the bus stop where Bobbi-Anne was last seen. The body was found in a wooded area near the shore, about half a mile inland. The body found was indeed Bobbi-Anne's. Her death was a devastating blow to her loved ones. A vigil was held in her memory near the bus stop where she was last seen, and the family expressed their gratitude to everyone who attended. During the vigil, Bobbi-Anne's mother, Donna, sent heartfelt love to her daughter. On behalf of her family, she expressed gratitude to everyone for coming together during this difficult time. She admits that although their beautiful Bobby and his life was taken, she will always be remembered. Bobby and McLeod's brother, Lee McLeod, paid a heartfelt tribute to his sister by sharing a childhood photo of the two of them. The picture showed the siblings smiling and wearing their primary school uniforms. In a message accompanying the photo, Lee expressed his grief and love for his sister. He wrote, "You didn't deserve this. You were a beautiful and talented girl, and I'm grateful to have had you as my little sister. I'll always treasure the adventures and journeys we had. Rest easy now." The police investigation revealed that Bobbi-Anne's body was found naked, but the medical examiner found no evidence of rape. However, she had suffered severe head and facial injuries, including 14 lacerations. The investigation has made progress. A man who walked into the police station on November 23rd, the same day the body was found. At 1:17 p.m., he approached the police and offered to provide information about the missing girl, stating that he wanted to help the police and her family. That man was Cody Ackland, 24, admitted to the crime. He confessed to kidnapping and killing Bobbi and providing details of the offense. Cody lived fairly close to the bus stop where Bobbi-Anne was last seen, and he was taken into custody as the prime suspect. Cody confirmed that he had abducted Bobbi-Anne from the bus stop, despite never having met her before the evening of the incident. Cody Ackland was a talented musician and guitarist in a local indie rock band, but he had a dark secret. Behind his charming facade, Cody was fascinated with serial killers and had a list of idols that included notorious murderers such as Joseph D'Angelo Jr., Andre Sacchettio, Ivan Milet, Fred West, and Tommy Sells. However, he worshipped a criminal he considered a hero, Ted Bundy, who confessed to killing at least 30 people. Cody's obsession with Ted was evident in the content he consumed. Investigators found 3,216 images on his phone, many of which were disturbing and reminiscent of horror movies. In the lead up to a young girl named Bobbi-Anne's death, Cody's internet searches became increasingly focused on serial killers and crimes. He also researched remote locations on Dartmoor, potential weapons, and browsed online stores for items such as baseball bats, ski masks, and waterproof clothing. However, his clandestine activities eventually led him to commit a serious crime. In a tragic twist of fate, Bobbi-Anne unknowingly crossed paths with Cody. On the evening of the incident, Bobbi-Anne arrived at the bus stop around 6:15 p.m. Cody, who was driving his Ford Fiesta in the area, spotted her and decided to target her. According to Cody's own confession, Bobbi-Anne's resemblance to his ex-girlfriend was merely a coincidence and not the reason for the attack. In reality, Cody had been planning to carry out a violent act for some time and was simply looking for a victim. The police investigation concluded that Cody would have carried out his plan regardless of who he encountered and that Bobbi-Anne was a random victim. Cody parked his car behind a bus stop after spotting Bobbi-Anne. He observed her for a few minutes to ensure no one else was around. Then, he retrieved a hammer he had previously purchased and crept up to Bobbi and, striking her twice in the head. Believing she was dead, Cody returned to his car and began to leave the scene. However, as he drove away, he noticed that Bobbi-Anne was alive and attempting to get up. Cody returned to the bus stop, moved Bobbi-Anne's semi-conscious body to his car, and drove 20 miles to the beloved Forest parking lot in Dartmoor. At 7:45 p.m., he stopped in the parking lot, which was located in a wooded area. His intention was to leave Bobbi-Anne's body there, but he discovered that she was still alive and conscious. Despite this, Cody did not seek help or take Bobbi-Anne to a hospital. Instead, he assisted her out of the car. When Bobbi-Anne expressed her fear, Cody responded by saying he was scared as well, admitting that he had never committed such an act before. He then struck Bobbi-Anne 12 times on the head with the hammer. In an attempt to destroy evidence, Cody burned Bobbi-Anne's purse. Even after inflicting severe injuries on Bobbi-Anne, she was still able to make a noise, prompting Cody to express his surprise for her resilience. Cody had one last opportunity to save Bobbi-Anne's life, but he chose not to take it. Instead, he claimed to have ended her suffering. He then placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove approximately 30 miles to Bobbi-Anne, where he hid the body after removing his shoes, clothing, and jewelry. He returned home around 10 p.m. and went to bed. The next day, Cody traveled to Tamerton Foley, north of Plymouth, and disposed of the hammer he used in the crime by throwing it into the River Tamar. He also discarded a bag containing his and Bobbi-Anne's blood-stained clothing in nearby allotments in Coombe Lane. Despite a thorough search, the hammer was never found. On November 21st, Cody spent the day socializing with friends, attending a pizza gathering, a band rehearsal, and a night out at the pub. Those who saw him that day noticed he was in an unusually good mood, happy, joking, and affectionate with his friends. The following day, November 22nd, Cody continued to enjoy himself, buying popcorn and watching a movie at the theater. Meanwhile, police, family, and volunteers were searching for Bobbi-Anne, and Cody was keeping up with the latest news on his phone. On November 23rd, Cody went to work at a car service company. During his lunch break, he sent a message to a chat room for his music group, expressing his love for them, and also texted his mother to tell her how much he loved her. Shortly after, he went to the police station and confessed to the crime. Shortly after, Cody's band members have issued a statement on Facebook announcing that they are disbanding the group with immediate effect as a mark of respect for the late Bobbi-Anne McLeod. They expressed their shock and disbelief at the tragic events, saying their thoughts and prayers are with Bobbi and his family and friends, who must be devastated by their loss. The band members explained that they cannot continue as a group and have decided to go their separate ways. They will not be making any further comments at this time. In a separate development, police revealed that they had found physical evidence linking Cody to the crime scene. This included Bobbi-Anne's DNA in his car and on his sneakers. The trial of Cody Ackland took place in May 2022. Cody's attorney, Ray Tully, stated that psychiatrists had evaluated Cody and found that he did not have a mental illness. However, Cody had experienced a difficult childhood and had been diagnosed with ADHD, dyslexia, depression, and anxiety. By the age of 19, Cody had a 7-year history of depression. Ray explained that Cody had not received much support or comfort from his family or school life. Specifically, Cody's father had not provided him with the guidance and support he needed. During sentencing, Judge Robert Linford told Cody that his actions were premeditated and brutal. The judge stated that the evidence showed Cody had intended to kill his victim and that the crime was a prolonged and horrific ordeal for the victim. The judge emphasized that Cody had planned and carried out the murder and that the victim's life had been brutally cut short. As a result, Cody Ackland, 24, was sentenced to life in prison. He will serve a minimum of 31 years before being eligible to apply for parole. Fiona Anderson, born in 1990 in the United Kingdom, was one of 3 daughters to Carrie and Michael Anderson. Her father served in the Royal Air Force, while her mother was a devoted homemaker who cared for their 3 children. Fiona had 2 sisters, Claire and Laura, and they shared a close bond, growing up in a harmonious family environment. Fiona attended various primary schools in Lowestoft, a town in Suffolk, England. She was often described as a bright and beautiful child who loved Disney movies and playing with her dolls. In her early years, she was outgoing and popular, but as she grew older, Fiona became more withdrawn and easily prone to mood swings. Her sudden changes in behavior worried her parents, who took her to several specialists. Although she was diagnosed with mental health issues, no specific condition was identified and her situation worsened over time. Despite the efforts of her family to support her, Fiona insisted that she could manage her problems on her own. She eventually met a young man named Craig McClellan and they began a relationship. In 2008, Fiona and Craig decided to move in together, even though neither had steady jobs. Craig frequently switched from one job to another, leading to an unstable situation for the couple. That same year, Fiona became pregnant, adding to their financial and emotional strain. According to family members, her mental health continued to deteriorate during her pregnancy. She refused to attend regular prenatal appointments or follow the advice of her parents and doctors. Craig also resisted any outside interference from Fiona's family. In June 2009, due to concerns about Fiona's prenatal care and the unstable family environment, obstetric services referred her case to Child and Youth Services. Soon after, the authorities intervened to ensure the well-being of the unborn child. On July 21, 2009, Fiona and Craig welcomed their first daughter, Lavina. After her birth, social workers requested that the couple agree to place Lavina under voluntary care, but they refused. Just 2 months later, Lavina was admitted to the hospital, where doctors found that she was severely underweight, likely due to malnutrition. After receiving care, she began to gain weight, confirming that she had not been properly fed by her parents. Despite repeated attempts by social workers to convince Fiona to surrender custody due to concerns about her mental health, she insisted that she was a good mother and would never give up her daughter. Shortly after this incident, Fiona and Craig were evicted from their home due to unpaid rent. They were forced to rely on the generosity of friends and family, which did not provide the stable environment needed for raising a child. For a time, they stayed with acquaintances and then moved in with Craig's parents. Things seemed to improve for a while, and the involvement of social services lessened. In June 2010, Fiona gave birth to their second child, a boy named Addie. However, with 2 small children and Craig's inconsistent income, the couple faced increasing financial challenges. Fortunately, Craig eventually secured a stable job, allowing them to rent a house in Lowestoft by February 2011, and it appeared that they were finally finding some stability. However, by May 2011, social services were once again alerted after neighbors reported that Lavina and Addie had been sleeping in a double stroller for 13 nights and had been fed only biscuits. When social workers and the police visited the home, they found the children malnourished and confined in playpens. The children were assessed, and it was determined that they were emotionally affected and had delayed language skills, leading to their inclusion in child protection plans for neglect. Fiona felt victimized and deeply offended by the suggestion that she was not a good mother. Craig, meanwhile, was often absent from home, claiming he was working extra hours to provide for the family, although his income did not reflect this. Despite their troubled relationship and the challenges they faced, Fiona and Craig did not take precautions to prevent further pregnancies. In May 2012, their third child, Kaiden, was born. Social services quickly became involved due to concerns about the parents' ability to care for another child. By August, child protection officers decided to initiate legal proceedings against the family. However, due to a lack of follow-up by a social worker, the case stalled. As their financial difficulties continued to mount, Fiona discovered in late 2012 that she was pregnant with their fourth child, a girl. Fiona's mental health, already fragile, was further strained by the hormonal changes brought on by her frequent pregnancies and childbirths, leaving her unable to cope with the mounting stress. According to her family, Fiona Anderson was growing increasingly isolated and refused any help from others, allowing only Craig to remain close, though he was drifting further away each day. By then, Craig had started an affair with a beautiful Polish woman he had met at work. The idea of moving in with her was highly appealing, as there would be no children to care for, and they could live a carefree life together. In March 2013, Craig decided to leave Fiona and move in with his lover, though he never disclosed the real reason for their separation. He simply packed his belongings and left, abandoning Fiona with 3 children, another on the way, and no job. Meanwhile, social services continued to monitor the family's deteriorating living conditions, especially now that a 4th child was soon to be born. On the afternoon of Sunday, April 14, 2013, Craig visited the house, bringing chocolate biscuits for his children. After spending some time with them, he told Fiona they needed to talk. During their conversation, the 24-year-old revealed that he had started a relationship with another woman and that their separation would be final. This news confirmed Fiona's suspicions about why Craig had been staying out late, supposedly working extra hours in recent months, and his intention to leave her and the children. Fiona's reaction was explosive. She completely lost control, and during the argument she grabbed a sharp object from the kitchen and stabbed Craig in the shoulder. He fell to the floor, bleeding, while their terrified children watched. Craig managed to escape from Fiona's rage, covering the wound with a napkin, and called an ambulance which took him to the hospital around 8 p.m. At the hospital, Craig lied to the doctors, claiming he had been attacked by a stranger trying to steal his phone. He later explained that he lied to avoid further complications with social services, fearing his children might be taken away and placed in foster care, a threat they had faced many times before. Craig believed Fiona was solely to blame for their problems with social services, and he denied any responsibility for the negative assessments they had received. As he prepared to leave the hospital, Craig received a text message from Fiona. In it, she told him to say goodnight to their children, as it would be the last time he would ever see them. Craig left the hospital and went to his new partner's house, not giving the message much thought. The hospital staff reported the attack to the police, but by the time officers arrived to speak with Craig, he had already left. They decided to visit the last address they had for him, the home he had shared with Fiona and their children. When they rang the intercom, Fiona refused to open the door and claimed she hadn't seen Craig in over a month. With no further leads, the police left. At around 8:30 a.m. on April 15, 2013, the police and emergency teams rushed to a parking lot after receiving a call from someone who had found a woman's body in a residential area. Paramedics tried to resuscitate her. Unfortunately, she was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigators noticed 4 names written on her body, and judging by her heavily pregnant appearance, it was clear she was in the advanced stages of pregnancy. After examining the scene, it was apparent that the woman had fallen from a high building, resulting in her immediate death along with that of her unborn baby. Forensic analysis would be needed to confirm the cause of death. An investigation was quickly launched to identify the deceased woman, and surveillance footage from the area showed a woman wearing the same clothes as the victim. This footage helped the police identify her as 23-year-old Fiona Anderson. With Fiona's identity confirmed, the police learned that she was known to Child Protective Services and had 3 children. Police rushed to Fiona's home, and when no one answered the door, they forced their way inside. What they found was beyond anything they were prepared for. The 3 young children were discovered lifeless on the bed in the main bedroom. They were tucked in, surrounded by stuffed animals, each with a kiss mark and lipstick on their foreheads. Messages written in green marker covered the walls. One note read, "I love you and will keep you safe. I tucked them into bed with their teddies. They love their teddies. They look so peaceful together." Each child had a message written on their torso, "I love you," along with their name in green ink and a small heart on their abdomen. Investigators also found a torn letter in the trash, offering a heartbreaking glimpse into Fiona's mental state. In the letter, she wrote about her inability to cope with Craig's abandonment and expressed her intent to take her own life while also taking her children with her. She reiterated her belief that a mother never leaves her children behind and pleaded for Craig to allow them all to be buried together. The children's bodies were taken to a hospital for autopsies to determine the causes of death. Meanwhile, police cordoned off the apartment to continue their investigation. The tragic news spread quickly, and neighbors and friends gathered outside the building, leaving flowers, teddy bears, and other tributes in a makeshift memorial at the entrance. Craig, accompanied by his mother, also visited the site, where they were met by a crowd of media reporters. In an interview, Craig admitted that he had a gut feeling it was Fiona when he heard the news about a woman who had taken her own life. He expressed his devastation, saying he had just lost his entire family. During an interview with investigators, confessed that Fiona had attacked him the previous night when he told her he was leaving for another woman. For the police, Craig's departure appeared to be the final trigger that led Fiona to end her life and the lives of her children. A young woman who knew the couple described Fiona as a charming person who didn't seem like the type of mother who would harm her children. As detectives continued their investigation, they discovered that just hours before the tragedy, Fiona had posted desperate messages on social media, revealing that Craig had left her for someone else. In her posts, she wrote that all she ever did was love him, and despite the pain he caused, neither she nor her children ever gave up on him. She also uploaded photos of her children, expressing how much she loved them. In one of her final posts, shared an ultrasound image and wrote that she was expecting a baby girl. After piecing together all the evidence, investigators concluded that it was Fiona who had tragically ended the lives of her children. Authorities released surveillance footage to the media in hopes of piecing together the final moments of Fiona Anderson's life. This strategy proved effective as around 13 people came forward to tell the police they had seen the young woman walking through the city on the morning of April 15th. Thanks to these witness reports, officers were able to obtain clearer footage showing Fiona wearing a long white coat and black shoes captured outside her home around 6:20 a.m. on that tragic morning. Fiona was seen heading toward Craig's residence, where she left a note in his mailbox. She then dropped off the keys to her apartment at a local hostel so Craig could pick them up later. Afterward, she wandered through the city for over an hour carrying her youngest son's favorite teddy bear. Several passersby reported that as she walked, she softly sang a lullaby. By 8:30 a.m. that same day, a cleaner in a multi-story parking garage spotted Fiona climbing up to the top level, still humming her lullaby. The cleaner watched as Fiona climbed onto the railings and then, without hesitation, leaped into the air, ending her life and that of the baby she was carrying. At this point, the police had received the results of Fiona's autopsy, confirming that she had died from severe head injuries consistent with a fall. However, investigators had not yet determined the cause of death for her 3 children, so further tests were needed. A close friend of Fiona's created a memorial page on social media in her memory. The page quickly filled with comments, many asking for respect and remembering Fiona as a warm and kind-hearted woman who would do anything to help others and adored her children. Other comments from friends and family expressed their grief over the loss and hoped that Fiona had finally found the peace she was searching for. Amid the mourning in May 2013, partial autopsy results were released for the children, revealing that all 3 had drowned. The post-mortem examinations found no signs of abuse or violence. According to the police's reconstruction of events, Fiona had prepared the bath, and after submerging her children one by one until they stopped breathing, she dried them off, laid them on her bed, and covered them with blankets, placing their favorite teddy bears in their arms. Once the examinations were completed, Fiona's family was able to claim her body, while Craig and his relatives took custody of the children's remains. In a televised interview, Fiona's parents, Michael and Carrie, pleaded with Craig to allow their daughter to be buried with her children, as it was her final wish, expressed in the letter she had left behind. Despite their heartfelt pleas, refused to let the children be buried alongside the woman who had taken their lives. On June 5th, surrounded by friends and family, the funeral for the children was held. Fiona's family was not allowed to attend. 10 days later, around 75 mourners gathered to say their final goodbyes to Fiona. Dozens of people, many dressed in pink, attended the funeral, which also served as a memorial for her 3 children. A horse-drawn hearse carried Fiona's body to the cemetery, where she was buried alongside her unborn daughter. Fiona Anderson's mother expressed deep gratitude to the local community for their support as they navigated the aftermath of the tragedy. She described Fiona as an amazing woman and a devoted mother who adored her children. In the wake of Fiona's death, many began to question the roles of both the police and social services in the tragedy. As a result, the Independent Police Complaints Commission launched an investigation. It was revealed that officers had visited Fiona's residence just hours before her death while investigating the stabbing of Craig. The inquiry centered around whether the police could have prevented the tragedy if they had entered the home, rather than merely speaking with Fiona through the intercom. After a thorough evaluation, the commission determined that there was no way for the officers to have predicted what would happen in the following hours. Between 2009 and 2013, social workers had visited Fiona's family more than 50 times. There were documented concerns that the children were often left in their stroller and, on some days, were only fed biscuits. An independent expert involved in the investigation noted that Fiona had been reluctant to cooperate, which hindered any psychiatric evaluation and prevented necessary legal actions. Although the deaths of her children weren't deemed predictable, the expert believed that if the children had been taken into care earlier, the tragedy might have been avoided. The coroner overseeing the case echoed this sentiment, stating that while it was not his intention to assign blame, it was evident that key steps, such as evaluating Fiona's mental health, had not been taken. He called for UK health authorities to prioritize providing support to parents with mental health challenges. The investigation also revealed communication failures and a lack of coordination between the various services involved in Fiona's care. It emerged that the assigned social worker was an unqualified trainee who had not handled the case appropriately due to inexperience and a lack of understanding of the severity of Fiona's situation. This worker should have been supported by a more experienced mentor who could have guided them in dealing with such a complex case. The head of social services in Suffolk defended the lack of intervention, acknowledging that some families are harder to engage than others. However, he also emphasized that it is the duty of social workers to protect children and provide the right support to families. As a result, several recommendations were made to improve the system's ability to support families in crisis. These included better training for social workers, improved communication between services, and a more proactive approach to identifying and assisting those at risk. Fiona Anderson's case shocked the community and underscored the need for meaningful support and monitoring for families facing similar crises. Mental health analysts confirmed that Fiona deeply loved her children, but had a distorted perception of reality due to her mental health struggles. Although she was aware of her actions, she had lost her sense of direction after Craig's departure, leaving her isolated with her darkest thoughts and fears. Fiona felt lost, and the only solution she saw to free her children from future pain was to take them with her to a better place where they could all be happy together, free from the stress of bills and financial worries. Despite knowing about Fiona's struggles and the challenges she faced with their children, Craig abandoned them all for a new life with his lover. He ignored the warning signs, including the final message Fiona sent him, which hinted at her intention to take drastic action. Many people sympathized with Craig, sharing his grief as a father who had lost 4 children. However, others criticized his behavior, considering him partly responsible for the tragedy. They believed Craig should have recognized Fiona's deteriorating mental health, especially after their first child, and taken steps to help her. Instead, by leaving her pregnant with their 4th child, he had abandoned her when she needed support the most. In this tragic story, the only innocent victims were the 4 children. They suffered from their mother's mental health problems, their father's abandonment, and the lack of protection from the official agencies that were supposed to safeguard their well-being. The case of Ollie Kemp. Alexandra Ollie Elizabeth Kemp was born October 11, 1982 in Leawood. She was the oldest of 3 children and the only daughter of her parents. After graduating high school with honors, Alexandra enrolled at Kansas State University. Following her freshman year, she returned to her hometown of Leawood for summer break. During her break, Alexandra took a part-time job at a local outdoor swimming pool near her parents' house, where her younger brother Tyler already worked. The pool was a quiet neighborhood spot, catering mainly to local residents, and it still operates today. On June 18, 2002, Alexandra reported to work on an overcast day because resulted in fewer visitors than usual. At 5 p.m., Tyler arrived at the pool to start his shift, but his sister Alexandra was nowhere to be found. Her phone and purse were still on the table where she usually sat, which made Tyler confused and worried. He immediately called his parents to report that Alexandra had vanished. Their father, Roger Kemp, rushed to the scene and began searching for his daughter. He first checked the pool, but it was empty. Next, he went to the small pump room near the pool which contained equipment for water purification, a ladder, and other items. Upon entering the pump room, Roger didn't see anything out of the ordinary at first. However, he soon noticed a leg protruding from under a tarp. As he lifted the tarp, he was met with a horrific sight. His daughter Alexandra, brutally beaten and naked from the waist down, with multiple bruises on her face and body. Roger quickly called 911 and spoke with the operator. When the ambulance arrived, Roger was performing CPR on his daughter. The paramedics took Alexandra to the hospital, but despite their best efforts, she sadly did not survive. Alexandra was declared dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. An examination revealed that the cause of death was strangulation despite the presence of multiple severe injuries. A thorough investigation found no evidence of forced intimacy, although her body was partially unclothed. The police collected DNA samples from Alexandra's body and secured the pool area, searching for clues to identify the perpetrator. Evidence of a struggle was evident in the room where Roger discovered Alexandra's body, including her flip-flops found in separate locations. Additionally, an open bottle of antiseptic gel and its cap were found at the scene. A few days later, while the police continued to investigate, Alexandra's family and hundreds of mourners gathered to pay their respects at a funeral ceremony. Phil Howes, Alexandra's boyfriend since high school, was initially suspected in her death. As a pool administrator, he worked the morning shift on the day of her death, and Alexandra arrived at noon to start her 5-hour shift. Although Phil often stayed after work to spend time with Alexandra, he left promptly after his shift that day because they had plans for the evening. Despite being an early suspect, Phil had a solid alibi and was quickly cleared by the police. In an interview with detectives, Phil mentioned that Alexandra often felt uncomfortable being alone at work because some of the lawn maintenance workers would stare at her and try to flirt. The police investigated the lawn workers, but each of them had an alibi. However, the inquiry wasn't entirely fruitless. Several workers reported seeing a suspicious man with a video camera lurking in the bushes near the pool the day before Alexandra's death, apparently watching the female lifeguards in swimsuits. The police were given conflicting reports about Alexandra's final hours. Some people said she left the scene in an old Ford pickup truck, while others mentioned different circumstances. A study of Alexandra's mobile phone activity revealed that she had made plans with a friend, Laurel, to meet on the day she died. However, Alexandra didn't show up. When Laurel went to the police station to give her account of events, she explained that Alexandra had asked her to come to the pool to keep her company until her shift ended. According to Laurel, the pool was empty that day due to the poor weather, which made Alexandra anxious. When Laurel arrived at the pool at around 2:30 p.m., she didn't see Alexandra anywhere. Instead, a man she didn't know emerged from the pool house and waved at her with a smile. Laurel thought this man might be Alexandra's boss, and she decided to leave so as not to get her friend in trouble for socializing during work hours. At the time, she had no reason to think that anything was amiss. Police investigation led them away from Alexandra's workplace and to a completely different suspect. As a witness, Laurel provided a detailed description of the person she believed committed the crime. The police used this description to create a sketch of the suspect, who was identified as a white man around 30 years old with a stocky build, short brown hair, and driving a 1980 Ford pickup truck. The suspect's identity was narrowed down when someone recognized the description as matching James Strader, a local mechanic who owned an old Ford pickup truck. James was questioned by the police and appeared to match the sketch, but he denied any involvement in Alexandra's death. His employer verified his alibi, stating that James was at work on the day of the murder. As a result, James was released from custody. While the police had eliminated James as a suspect, forensic analysis of evidence collected from the crime scene revealed male DNA on an antiseptic gel tube and on Alexandra's body. Unfortunately, the DNA did not match anyone in the police database, leaving the case still unsolved. Alexandra's family, friends, and boyfriend were ruled out as suspects after DNA tests showed no match with the DNA samples found on her body. The investigation was driven by Alexandra's father, Roger Kemp, who was determined to find his daughter's killer. After losing his child, Roger felt like he had lost his purpose in life. However, he found a new reason to keep going: justice for Alexandra. In an interview, Roger explained his approach: "You can either give up or keep fighting. I chose to fight." Impressed by his dedication, the police department gave Roger a workspace where he could collect and share information and collaborate with the investigators. As they explored all available leads, Roger and the investigators contacted the popular TV show, America's Most Wanted, and asked them to feature Alexandra's case. The show's producers agreed, and her story was aired. The episode generated hundreds of calls from viewers with potential tips. Although the authorities thoroughly investigated each lead, none of them led to a breakthrough, and the case stalled once again. In February 2003, 8 months after Alexandra's death, a promising new lead emerged. Following a thorough investigation, police in Utah apprehended a suspect. 3 separate witnesses, including 2 women and a 14-year-old girl, came forward to report being forced into intimate encounters with a man. He had managed to evade capture initially, but was eventually tracked down and arrested in Utah. The arrested individual was identified as James Strader, the same person who had been questioned by Kansas police earlier. Notably, James bore a strong physical resemblance to the suspect's composite sketch. James was questioned by the police, but they failed to collect his DNA sample at the time. This might have been because his employer had convinced the police that James was at work on the day of the crime and had not left the premises. Despite this, James denied any involvement in Alexandra Kemp's death. Although he resembled the suspect in the composite sketch, James claimed he had not been near the pool on the day of the crime. He eventually provided a DNA sample for analysis. The results indicates that his DNA did not match the DNA found on Alexandra's body or the antiseptic gel tube. James was later imprisoned for unrelated charges, and the investigation into Alexandra Kemp's death hit a dead end once again. A year after Alexandra's death, the police still had no leads. Roger Kemp, Alexandra's father, and Phil House, her boyfriend, continued to fight for justice. Phil, who was also the president of the student community, sent the composite sketch of the suspect to students at other universities via email and asked them to watch an episode of America's Most Wanted that featured Alexandra Kemp's case. A year had passed, but the police and relatives' efforts had yielded no results in the Alexandra Kemp case. Undeterred, Roger Kemp, Alexandra's father, continued his quest for justice. He reached out to the America's Most Wanted program again, requesting a rerun of the episode about Alexandra's death. The show's creators asked if there were any new developments, and although Roger replied that there were none, his determination impressed them, leading to the episode being aired again. The rerun generated a fresh wave of calls to the police, prompting Roger to offer a $25,000 reward for any information that could help identify the person responsible for his daughter's death. The city of Leawood authorities increased the reward to $50,000. Roger also distributed flyers featuring his daughter's photo, a sketch of the suspect, and details about the reward. As Roger drove along the highway, he noticed billboards and realized they could be an effective way to raise awareness about the case. He began contacting advertising agencies to inquire about the cost of posting the information on a billboard. When he called the Lamar Advertising Company, the owner refused to take his money, offering to display the information on multiple billboards for free instead. Roger decided to publicize a sketch of the suspect and reward information on billboards along a major highway. The police received hundreds of tips, which took time to investigate. Notably, multiple tips mentioned the same individual, Teddy Hoover, who owned an old Ford pickup truck and worked in pool maintenance. His appearance matched the suspect's, making it unlikely to be a coincidence. The police launched a search for Teddy Hoover and found his address in Kansas. When they arrived, Teddy answered the door, appearing surprised and nervous. However, this reaction didn't necessarily imply guilt, as many people become nervous when confronted by the police. When questioned about his whereabouts on June 18, 2002, Teddy claimed he couldn't remember, which was understandable given their time lapse. Teddy denied any involvement in maintaining the pool where Alexandra worked. Nevertheless, the detectives asked him to provide a voluntary DNA sample to rule him out as a suspect. Teddy declined, stating he needed to consult with a lawyer first. He promised to contact the police after speaking with his attorney. The next day, Teddy's lawyer reached out to the investigators, expressing his client's concerns about his DNA sample being added to a database. Teddy reportedly believed in various conspiracy theories and feared that if he cooperated with the police, they would use the information against him in other cases. In an effort to alleviate his concerns, the investigators promised not to enter his DNA into any database and only use it to compare with the DNA found on Alexandra Kemp. The lawyer agreed to speak with his client and said he would call back. As they waited for the call, the police reviewed the case materials again and stumbled upon a piece of paper in one of the folders with a name that caught their attention. On the day of Alexandra's death, detectives began questioning onlookers who had gathered by the pool, trying to determine if anyone had seen anything suspicious. Interestingly, one of the people they spoke with was Teddy Hoover, who had claimed he had never been to the crime scene before. As the investigation continued, detectives grew increasingly confident that Teddy Hoover might be the man they had been searching for over the past 2 years. After several days, investigators contacted Teddy's lawyer to ask if his client was willing to provide a DNA sample. However, the lawyer responded by stating that his client had refused his services and broken off contact. Police immediately went to Teddy's house, but he had already escaped. As a result, the 29-year-old suspect was placed on the National Wanted list. Despite the efforts of the detectives, Teddy managed to evade capture for months. Billboards featuring his image were still up, but the search had yielded nothing. It wasn't until September 2004, when an anonymous caller contacted the police, that a new lead emerged. According to the caller, he knew the name of Teddy's girlfriend, with whom Teddy was living in Kansas. Detectives sought to locate Laura Barr, a woman connected to Teddy Hoover, but discovered she had left the state at the same time he escaped. This led them to investigate further. The U.S. Postal Service informed the Kansas State Police that Laura was receiving mail in Litchfield, Connecticut, along with a man named Benjamin Appleby at the same address. The house where they resided was secluded and located in a rural area. Authorities suspected that Benjamin Appleby might be an alias for Teddy Hoover. To aid in the investigation, detectives from Leawood contacted the Connecticut State Police, requesting their assistance in locating Benjamin. It was discovered that he had a prior record in Connecticut, with an outstanding arrest warrant stemming from a 1997 incident where he had exposed himself to a schoolgirl. However, Benjamin had evaded capture and fled the state. With the existing warrant, detectives proceeded to the address associated with Benjamin's mail. Upon arrival, they found him at home and immediately took him into custody. As suspected, Benjamin Appleby was confirmed to be Teddy Hoover. It was revealed that while detectives in Kansas had been seeking a DNA sample from Teddy in connection with Alexandra Kemp's death, he had returned to Connecticut and resumed using his real name, attempting to maintain a low profile and escape notice. To apprehend Benjamin, detectives from Leawood traveled to Connecticut anticipating that he would once again claim innocence. Before bringing him in for questioning, they devised a plan to unsettle him. They filled the interrogation room with crime scene photos and pictures of Alexander, and placed folders with his name on the table, creating the illusion that the investigation had substantial evidence against him. When Benjamin entered the interrogation room, he was visibly shaken and unable to speak. A detective confronted him, inquiring about the implications of obtaining his DNA sample. Shortly after, Benjamin broke down in tears, confessing to Alexandra's death. He then recounted the events of the fateful June day, explaining that he had noticed Alexandra, found her attractive, and attempted to flirt with her. When she entered the pump room, he followed her, locked the door, and trapped her inside. When Benjamin touched she fought back, leaving him feeling humiliated. In a fit of anger, he attacked her, beating and strangling her until she lost consciousness. Benjamin then attempted to take advantage of her body, undressing her partially. He retrieved a tube of antiseptic gel from a first aid kit, intending to use it as a lubricant. However, just as he was about to proceed, the sound of a car horn distracted him. The victim's friend, who was waiting in a car behind a fence, had noticed something was amiss and sounded the horn. Fearing he would be caught, Benjamin hastily covered the body and fled the scene. Later, Benjamin returned to the area, where he encountered Alexandra's friend, whom he greeted with a smile and a wave, trying to appear nonchalant. He then got into his pickup truck and drove away. Hours later, Benjamin returned to the crime scene again, this time blending in with the crowd of onlookers gathered near the pool. The DNA evidence ultimately led to Benjamin's downfall. Tests revealed that the DNA found on the tube of antiseptic gel and on Alexandra's body matched Benjamin's. Thanks in large part to the efforts of investigator Roger Kemp, the police were finally able to identify the man responsible for Alexandra's murder more than 2 years after the crime was committed. Benjamin Appleby claimed he initially wanted to plead guilty to avoid putting Alexandra's family through further emotional distress. However, at his first court hearing, he suddenly declared his innocence, stating that his confession was made under duress. Despite this, DNA analysis revealed that his DNA was the only sample found on the victim's body, making it difficult to dispute his involvement. Benjamin's lawyers attempted to argue that their client did not intentionally take Alexandra's life, admitting that he was responsible for her death but claiming it was not premeditated. However, forensic experts pointed out that Benjamin had strangled Alexandra for approximately 10 minutes, during which time he could have stopped but chose not to. The prosecution argued that Benjamin's sole intention was to observe Alexandra. On the day of the incident, June 18th, the pool area was empty due to cloudy weather, allowing Benjamin to take advantage of the situation. He was found guilty by a jury in December 2005 and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, as well as an additional 19 years for attempting to force Alexandra into intimacy. In 2019, Benjamin appealed the decision, but the court upheld the life imprisonment sentence for first-degree murder. The Court of Appeal also ruled that the attempt to force Alexandra into intimacy was already taken into account during the initial sentencing. Benjamin was sentenced twice for the same crime, prompting the court to overturn the second conviction. However, even if Benjamin is released on parole, he will be 81 years old by that time. The authorities involved in the case credit Roger Kemp's persistence for helping them catch the culprit. While Benjamin was in prison, Roger and his wife established a self-defense program for girls, teaching thousands of girls and women across the country basic self-defense techniques. Roger Kemp's tireless efforts to bring attention to the case and his work in creating a safe community did not go unnoticed. He was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal by Barack Obama at the White House. Until his passing at 77 on March 1, 2022, Roger continued to work for the foundation he established in his daughter's name. His ultimate goal was to make a difference in at least one person's life. 21-year-old Patina Eps lived in Inglewood, California in 2005. On April 26th, Patina's body was found lying in a carport in Gardena, California. Someone was backing out of one of the 4 stalls in the carport and then discovered her. A medical examiner determined that she had been strangled. Investigators found fingerprints that did not belong to Patina on her purse. There was also DNA from a man at the crime scene. They theorized that it belonged to the person that ended her life. Technology was not advanced enough for them to identify the culprit. Investigators could not find other useful leads, so the case went cold. In 2021, investigators took another look at Patina's case. They resubmitted forensic evidence from the crime scene using new technology. This led them to 56-year-old Charles Wright. He was arrested on January 27, 2022. Wright denied involvement in the crime. He said his fingerprints were on Patina's purse because he sold it to, according to him, at the time he was selling purses, tennis shoes, and clothing from the trunk of his car. Wright had a harder time explaining away why his DNA was found at the crime scene. Wright has been working as a teacher since 1999. He said he resigned from Inglewood Unified School District to fight the case against him. This is what he had to say. "I didn't do this. The thing is, everybody that knows me knows that I used to sell bags and clothes out of my car. that's the only possible way could happen. He said he believes people who purchased bags from him during that time period could confirm his story. County Administrator Erica F. Torres, head of Englewood Unified, told staff and parents in a letter dated Saturday that the district learned of the accusation the day before and that Wright would no longer be teaching at any of its schools. Wright is scheduled for arraignment on June 28, 2022. Authorities said that anyone with information regarding the case can anonymously contact Crime Stoppers at this number. It is not known yet why Wright did what he did, but investigators did say that they don't believe Wright and Patina knew each other. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.